Welcome back to HFY Realm Tales, where humanity doesn't just play by the galaxy's rules, we stalk the shadows between them. If you're new here, hit subscribe so you never miss the next human legend whispered across alien academies. Now picture this, a training complex floating in the void like a silent monolith, its corridors woven from obsidian composite and reflective alloys that swallow sound. The Galactic Stealth Proficiency Exam was a rite of passage for every species: Krillins with their adaptive scales, Vectari with neural cloaks, and Drosk hunters who could slow their heartbeats to near stillness. They came armed with cloaking harnesses, optical distorters, sound-dampening pads, tools built by scientists who studied stealth as a science. Only one student arrived with nothing but her uniform, her senses, and a steady heartbeat. A human girl named Arya Vale. She walked into the testing hallway without the faintest ripple of fear, despite standing several heads shorter than the reptilian candidates around her. Murmurs slid through the ranks like whispers through tall grass. "Is that the human? Why doesn't she have any gear?" "They rely on instinct. Primitive, but effective, at least according to their file." The examiners, hidden behind polarized glass, activated the trial. The lights died with a soft click, plunging the Academy's training wing into an engineered darkness so perfect it tasted metallic. The students scattered instantly, their cloaks shimmering as they vanished, becoming outlines, then echoes, then nothing. But Arya didn't vanish. She simply stopped moving. The observers frowned. "Is her equipment malfunctioning?" "She has no cloak to malfunction." "Then why isn't she hiding?" But Arya wasn't frozen, she was listening. The ventilation hum. The faint metallic tick of cooling pipes. The subtle shift of air pressure that told her exactly where the sentry drones drifted on their patrol. And beneath it all, the rhythmic steps of the examiners. 3 of them. Stationed across the maze. Breathing in patterns they believed were undetectable. They had forgotten one thing: humans evolved to hear predators long before they built tools to kill them. Arya inhaled once, slow and controlled, and slid into motion with the fluid, grounded silence of something that studied prey from tree branches. She stayed low, pressing herself against the cold flooring, her breaths measured until they vanished into the hum of the ducks. The Academy's AI registered her movement as below expected biometric noise threshold. That line alone made 2 examiners sit forward in their seats. Meanwhile, the other students were scattering, cloaks flickering faint distortions that Arya could track with her naked eyes. She could see the shimmer. She knew how light bent. Every alien cloak hummed with a faint vibration. Every step they took shifted the dust motes. Every breath warmed the air in ways her instincts caught without conscious thought. She slipped behind a pillar and let her body melt into stillness. Bones relaxed. Heartbeat slowed. Shoulders loosened. Her silhouette broke apart in the fractured light until even the Academy sensors struggled to pin her outline. She didn't imitate their technology. She imitated the things that once stalked humans across the savannas and forests, predators who froze so completely they became part of the earth. Then she moved again, silent as a falling leaf. The first examiner leaned in to monitor a console tracking each student. "Candidate 12 Vectari is cloaked. Candidate 07 Krillin is cloaked. Candidate 19 Human, assessing." The console flickered. "Subject missing. Recalibrating." Another examiner muttered. "Missing means her biometrics dropped beneath floor detection. Impossible." "Then find her." They couldn't. Arya had already mapped the entire corridor layout using scent, airflow, memory, and the faint vibration of the walls when other students brushed against them. She didn't hide from the examiners, she encircled them. Like a silent tide wrapping around a lone ship. She crept across the ceiling beams, not designed for students, but accessible enough for someone with powerful legs and good judgment. Hanging there, upside down, she listened to 2 cloaked aliens below her stumble into each other, both believing they were undetectable. She didn't even bother tagging them. They weren't the target. The exam required students to evade detection. But Arya had no intention of merely evading. The trial was about stealth. Predators were the masters of stealth. She planned to show the academy the difference. With a slow, controlled exhale, she dropped down behind the first examiner before he even sensed the air pressure shift. Her hand tapped his shoulder. The examiners froze. "Tag registered," the AI announced. The classroom erupted in confusion. Arya didn't stop. She vanished back into the shadows, slipping along the wall, using its reflective coating to fragment her outline. By the time the second examiner realized he was alone, her fingers tapped the back of his neck. "Tag registered." The third examiner, a veteran Drosk hunter, activated his infrared vision. Arya watched from above as his eyes darted, scanning the hall for heat signatures. Humans were warm, yes, but they could also control their breathing, distributing heat more evenly, lowering their signatures for brief windows, just long enough to reposition. She let her pulse slow until her warmth blended with the ambient temperature of the wall. The veteran muttered, "This shouldn't be possible." Arya dropped silently behind him. Fingers brushed the ridge of his spine. "Tag registered." The lights came on. Every cloaked alien student flickered into existence, confused, sweaty, and wide-eyed. Arya stood alone in the center, breathing evenly, heart steady, like the hunt was still in progress and she simply decided to pause. The examiners stared at her as though she were a creature pulled from ancient Earth mythology. And somewhere above, the Academy director whispered the line that would travel across the galaxy for years. "She didn't pass the stealth test, she hunted the people running it." The lights had barely finished warming the room when the whispers began spreading like ripples through deep, dark water. Every alien student stared at Arya as if she had shed a disguise rather than emerged from the shadows. The Krillin with iridescent scales blinked rapidly, their frills puffing in agitation. A Vectari student, still clutching a malfunctioning cloaking harness, took a careful step away from her, as though instinct told them prey should not move so close to a predator. But Arya didn't acknowledge any of them. She kept her breathing calm, her shoulders loose, and her gaze steady, not confrontational, not proud, just quietly analyzing the room the way someone who understood threats on a primal level would. What unnerved them most wasn't that she tagged the examiners. It was that she had done it effortlessly, as naturally as exhaling. The examiners regrouped behind the security glass, whispering to each other in low tones. Their screens replayed every second of Arya's movement, or rather, the lack of visible movement. In the recordings, she blurred into the darkness, a faint distortion blending so perfectly with the environment that even when they enhanced the footage, she was indistinguishable from the stationary beams. "She didn't use any equipment," one examiner muttered. "No distortion field. No optical scramblers. Her uniform's basic fabric can't bend light." The senior examiner tapped the screen. "There." A faint heat ripple. Barely a whisper of temperature shifting along the wall. "Arya moving. This is not technology," the examiner breathed. "This is training." But it wasn't training either, not fully. Humans trained, yes. But primal instinct had shaped their species long before civilization. Arya's ancestors hadn't stalked prey with cloaking devices. They had survived by reading nature's subtle cues, by merging with environments, by learning when to move and when to become part of the landscape. The director of the academy entered silently from the rear, a tall, slender being with crystal black eyes that reflected everything and revealed nothing. The students fell silent as she approached Arya. "Human," she said softly, voice smooth like polished obsidian. "What you did was not part of the test." Arya looked up, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her eyes. "I thought the objective was to avoid detection." "Correct. But you did the opposite." A few students snickered, mistaking reprimand for amusement. The director turned her gaze on them. The room froze as if oxygen itself solidified. "She did more than avoid detection. She reversed the objective. She hunted the observers placed above her." She faced Arya fully now. "Explain." Arya wasn't used to speaking in front of alien crowds. Words weren't her strength. Silence was. Observation was. But she chose them carefully. "You said stealth is survival," she began. But predators use stealth too. They don't hide for the sake of being unseen. They hide to approach, to strike. Her voice stayed low, but solid. So I did what predators do. A shiver rippled through the room. Not fear, something deeper. Recognition. The Drosk hunter examiner rubbed the back of his neck where Arya had tagged him. Your species has instincts like this naturally? Arya shrugged. Some more than others. And you? I just listen, she replied. The environment tells you everything. The Vektari student stepped forward. But how did you cloak yourself without a field generator? Arya hesitated, searching for a simple explanation. Most species change the environment to hide. Humans change themselves instead. Slow heartbeat. Control breathing. Stay still enough that nothing in the air shifts. She glanced at the ceiling beams. And you use your surroundings. Shadows. Reflections. Sound. The Krillin scoffed. That is primitive. The director's eyes flashed. Then why did your advanced technology fail and hers succeed? The Krillin fell silent. The director continued pacing slowly. There is power in instinct. Ancestral memory. The body remembers lessons the mind forgets. She raised a slender hand and dimmed the lights again, but only to a soft dawn glow. Human. Demonstrate again. Arya stiffened. On who? On me. Gasps filled the room. The director was known galaxy-wide for her sensory precision. Even camouflaged assassins had failed to approach her unnoticed. This was an audacious command. But Arya nodded. No hesitation. No fear. The director stepped to the far side of the room and stood still, her silhouette tall and calm. You may begin. And do not hold back. Arya inhaled, steadying her pulse. She focused first on the sounds, the hum of the overhead lights, the faint rustle of alien uniforms, the shifting weight distribution of 20 species trying not to breathe too loudly. Then she tuned them out. One by one. Until her world narrowed to her heartbeat and the director's. She slid backward, letting her body melt into a shadow cast by the pillar beside her. Her limbs loosened, her shoulders dropped, and her breathing slow blended with the air until her presence dissolved into the background. The students watched, eyes wide, scanning desperately for any sign of movement. But Arya wasn't in front of them anymore. Not visible. Not audible. Not trackable. Impossible, the Drosk whispered. Even predators leave trace signatures. The director lifted her chin slightly, ears thin crystalline plates, twitching as she focused her senses. Her pupils narrowed as she scanned the room. Seconds stretched. A minute passed. Nothing. Then another. Her expression tightened. She heard nothing. Felt nothing. Sensed nothing. Arya was gone. And then a breath. Soft. Barely enough to move a dust mote. But it came from behind her. She turned, too late. Arya's fingertip touched her wrist. The director exhaled sharply. Enough. The lights brightened. Arya stood behind her, posture relaxed, as if she hadn't just outmaneuvered one of the galaxy's greatest living hunters. The director lifted Arya's hand and raised it for all to see. This, she declared, is stealth. Not technology, not camouflage, not illusions. This is instinct. Precision. Humanity. The room erupted, not in applause, but in stunned silence. And Arya, for the first time since stepping into the academy, allowed herself the smallest smile. Say Section 3 when you're ready. You said 3, ChatGPT said. The director's words The director's words echoed through the hall like a blade drawn in ritual silence, and even after the lights stabilized, no one moved. The alien students stayed frozen where they stood, as if afraid a single step might draw Arya's attention again. They had seen her vanish, not through technology, not through illusions, but through a kind of quiet biological mastery that felt older than every species in that room. But the exam wasn't over. The Academy's protocols demanded a secondary trial, the hunt simulation, a test usually reserved only for students who passed the stealth exam with high honors. The moment Arya was acknowledged, the training platform beneath their feet began to shift. Walls rotated, corridors extended, and the entire floor reconfigured into a labyrinth built from metallic stone and shifting panels. The lights dimmed to a cold twilight blue. A hollow voice boomed overhead. Second trial initiated. Targets, examiners. Objective, elude, evade, or engage. The alien students immediately panicked. Engage? Against examiners? No one in the Academy history had dared to strike back in the hunt simulation. It was unthinkable. But Arya didn't panic. She simply knelt, pressed her hand to the floor, and listened. The platform vibrated differently now. New pathways, new angles, vents open on one side, airflow shifted on another. The environment spoke to her. And she heard everything. The Drosk Hunter examiner stepped forward, his heavy, chitin-plated boots thudding in rhythm. The rules for the second trial differ from the first, he said, glaring at Arya with wary respect. You no longer need to hide. Arya's eyes narrowed slightly. But we can. He exhaled once, acknowledging the implication. If you wish, the examiners will pursue the candidates. Your objective is survival. Engagement is permitted, but not required, unless you choose it. The other students exchanged fearful glances. Their cloaking devices flickered to life, shimmering faintly as they activated their stealth settings. All except Arya. She stripped off her Academy-issued vest and tied it around her waist, leaving only the simple dark shirt underneath. The light clung to her skin strangely, almost as if she existed in a layer separate from the world around her. The director stepped aside. Begin. The moment she said it, the corridor behind them exploded in motion. Examiners, fast, precise, augmented with sensory enhancements, burst from hidden doorways. Alien students bolted like startled animals, cloaking flickering as they scattered. But Arya didn't run. She moved sideways into a shadowed alcove, let her heartbeat slow, and disappeared between two shifting wall plates just before they sealed. Inside the narrow cavity, darkness swallowed everything. She pressed her palms against the cool surface, feeling the vibrations. Each examiner's movement produced a distinct signature, one heavy and stomping, one sharp and precise, one near silent but with a faint buzzing hum from energy boots. She catalogued them instantly. 3 hunters. 3 patterns. 3 rhythms. And none of them were human. Arya slipped into the ventilation shaft above, her body folding into a space most species couldn't even fit into. Her fingers gripped the inner ridges, guiding her silently as she crawled with controlled precision. Below her, the first examiner, a Vectari tracker, moved with unnatural stillness, scanning every corner with multispectrum optics. His equipment painted the world in shifting colors, infrared, ultraviolet, motion trace. None detected her. Arya waited until he walked beneath her, then relaxed her muscles completely, letting herself hang suspended by only her legs. For a brief moment, her face hovered inches above the tracker's skull. A predator would strike here. A hunter would end it. But the trial wasn't about killing, just proving survival. She let her breath brush his shoulder, a tiny gust of warmth. He spun instantly, claws extended, but she was already gone, sliding through the shaft with fluid grace. The hallway erupted in confusion. "She's here!" the tracker shouted. Where did she go?" The alien students, panicked, ran blindly through the maze. Their cloaks flickered, creating luminous distortions that examiners could easily follow. Arya observed from above, moving like a current of silent wind. The second examiner, a Krillin sentinel, activated a sonic pulse grid. The walls vibrated with scanning waves meant to reveal hidden bodies. Arya pressed herself flat, lowering her profile until she felt the sonic pressure slide over her like a cold whisper. She exhaled, timing her breath with the waves so her lungs expanded at the exact moment the skin dimmed. The sentinel's grid returned an empty corridor. Negative. Human not located. A soft smirk touched her lips. They were looking for a student using stealth. They weren't looking for prey that had become the hunter. She dropped from the ceiling, silent as dust settling on stone. The sentinel startled. Too slow. Arya slipped behind him and tapped the joint of his armor. Tag! He spun. She was already sprinting into the next corridor. The labyrinth shifted around her. Walls grinding, floors rotating, vents opening into new angles. The environment meant to confuse the candidates instead served as her ally. Because humans didn't memorize paths, they sensed them. They adapted. The third examiner, the Drosk hunter, appeared at the far end of the hall. Muscular. Scarred. A veteran of a dozen real hunts. His mandibles clicked as he readied himself. Human, he growled. You have skill. Arya mirrored his stance, lowering her center of gravity. You chased me, he said. Now I chase you. She tilted her head. You sure? The Drosk lunged. Fast. Terrifyingly fast. But Arya slipped past him, her foot hooking behind his leg as she twisted her torso. He crashed into the wall with a thunderous crack, dazed long enough for Arya to roll backward, regain her footing, and tap his armored back. Tag! He froze. Not because he was defeated, but because he recognized the truth, she could have taken him out. Easily. The simulation halted. Sirens cut off. Lights returned to full brightness. The labyrinth receded into the floor. And Arya stood alone at the center of the arena, breath steady, body relaxed, eyes calm, a predator that had chosen to show mercy. The air in the training hall felt heavier now, charged with a tension no one dared break. Even as the labyrinth dissolved beneath their feet and the pristine academy floor reemerged, the alien students kept their distance from Arya, forming a loose ring around her as if she were a volatile biological phenomenon that might reappear in unexpected places. They had all run. They had all depended on technology. And she had slipped between the walls, above the lights, beneath the sensors, moving with a quiet, lethal fluency no device could mimic. The director stepped forward, her dark crystalline eyes fixed on Arya with a mix of fascination and something deeper, respect, tinged with caution. The hunt simulation is designed to measure evasion, she said softly, her voice carrying across the room like cool smoke. Not inversion. Arya blinked. Inversion? You inverted the objective, the director continued. Instead of avoiding the examiners, you chose to take control of the environment. The Drosk hunter examiner wiped the dust from a dent in the wall where Arya had slammed him. His mandibles clicked thoughtfully. She used the terrain better than any species I've tested. Humans do not simply hide. They adapt. But the Krillin sentinel snarled, tail lashing in agitation. This isn't survival. This is aggression. She could have crippled you. Arya's voice was calm, almost too calm. I didn't. But you could have. Intent matters, Arya replied. The director turned her gaze toward the trembling students. What troubles you more? She asked. That she had the ability, or the discipline not to use it. The room fell silent. Arya felt all their eyes on her, fear, admiration, confusion. She had seen those looks before, on Earth during childhood drills, when she moved differently from the others, hearing things they didn't hear, sensing dangers they didn't sense. Her instincts had never been comfortable. They had been isolating. But here, surrounded by species who prided themselves on superior senses and elite technology, suddenly she wasn't strange. She was exceptional. The director spoke again. Human. During the trial, you could sense the examiner's positions without equipment. Explain how. Arya hesitated. She wasn't sure how to verbalize something she simply felt. Everything in an environment moves, she began slowly. Air currents. Vibrations. Heat. Sound. Even silence has texture. The Vectari tracker frowned. Silence has texture? Arya nodded. When something blocks airflow, it changes the sound the environment makes, even if it's too quiet to hear. When someone steps on metal, the vibration shifts shape, even down the hall. She looked around at the towering beings encircling her. I'm not seeing you. I'm feeling the world around you. The director tilted her head, intrigued. A sixth sense? No, Arya said simply. Just an old one. Her ancestors had listened like this long before cities, long before weapons, when survival meant hearing the shape of danger before it emerged. The students whispered among themselves. Humans evolved in constant danger. No wonder their instincts sharpened. We grew safe. They grew lethal. But as the murmurs grew, the Academy's central AI chimed. Academy Director, a visitor requests presence. The director stiffened. A visitor? The doors at the far end of the hall opened with a hiss, and a tall figure entered, armored in matte steel plates, wearing a veteran insignia shaped like a shattered comet. A galactic marshal. The highest law enforcement and military authority in this sector. The room tensed. Even the examiners exchanged uneasy glances. Marshals didn't visit academies. They summoned people to them. But this one walked straight toward Arya. You are the human, he said, not a question, but a statement echoed with gravity. Arya swallowed. Yes. The marshal raised a hand. A hologram flickered to life, footage from her trials, her movements traced in glowing lines, showing the impossible swiftness and silence of her attacks. Your performance has reached command networks across 3 systems, he said. The Council has taken interest. The director stepped forward sharply. Council interest? Already? Her instincts, the marshal replied, eyes never leaving Arya, are uncommon. Even among humans. Arya didn't move. She didn't shift. But her heart pulsed once, hard. What do they want? She asked quietly. The marshal tapped his wrist pad. A new hologram appeared, an insignia shaped like twin crescents surrounding a darkened star. Some students gasped. The Night Wardens, the Vectari whispered. That unit is myth. Not myth, the marshal said. Simply selective. Arya frowned. What are they? The director answered instead. The Night Wardens are an elite covert corps. They operate in the deepest shadows of interstellar space. Hunters of threats no one else can track. Operatives who must read environments perfectly, who must vanish in plain sight, who must sense danger without seeing it. Her eyes glimmered, reflecting Arya's silhouette. They take only one recruit a cycle. The marshal stepped closer, his presence heavy but not hostile. Human, he said. The council reviewed your trials. They believe you may be qualified. A stunned silence radiated across the hall. Arya's breath caught, but her posture stayed steady, her face unreadable. Qualified for what? The marshal's voice dropped to a low rumble. For a role that requires someone who isn't just trained, but born to stalk the void. He extended a small black insignia, polished, cold, gleaming faintly with an inner violet light. Arya Vale, he said. Will you accept evaluation for the Night Warden Corps? The students watched her as if the galaxy itself was waiting. And Arya, heart pounding once, lifted her hand toward the insignia. The exam chamber fell into a silence so deep it felt like the room itself was holding its breath. The air still trembled from the shock of what had unfolded. 3 armed alien examiners dragged unconscious out of their own test arena by a human teenager who hadn't just passed their stealth test, she had inverted it. The walls of obsidian alloy hummed with low-frequency resonance, as if whispering rumors of what had just happened. Behind the reinforced observation glass, the Academy's senior officers still stood frozen, unable to align what they had witnessed with the carefully controlled reality they had built their careers upon. You weren't supposed to hunt the instructors. You weren't even supposed to see them. The test was designed around the galaxy's finest cloaking and sensory suppression technology, meant to evaluate how well cadets could hide from invisible threats. Lyra hadn't hidden, not once. Instead, she had moved like an apex creature awakening in an unfamiliar biome, tracing sound the way other species trace light, feeling the faint magnetic flutter of cloaking fields as though her skin were antennae, mapping the room with instincts no alien physiology handbook had ever accounted for. And now she stood alone in the center of the chamber, breathing steady, pulse calm, as though dragging out 3 grown examiners were just another school task to check off before lunch. A pair of armored medics hurried past her to collect the groaning instructors, but Lyra didn't move. She only watched quietly, almost politely, like a wolf stepping aside for other hunters to finish the cleanup. The academy director, an elder Varan with silver-scaled skin and too many medals, stepped into the arena with the rigid posture of someone who wasn't sure if he was greeting a student or negotiating with a threat. His voice crackled through the chamber's quiet. "Cadet Lyra Vance," he said, carefully neutral. "Do you understand what you have done here?" Lyra blinked at him, confused at the question. "I passed the test," she said simply. The director's throat frill fluttered with unease. "You incapacitated the evaluators." Lyra shrugged lightly. "They tried to ambush me. I responded." "Responded?" he echoed. "Child, this was not combat. It was assessment." Lyra tilted her head. "But you said the objective was to avoid being caught." "They kept trying to catch me. So I made sure they couldn't." There was no arrogance in her voice. No defiance. Just pure human logic, terrifying in its clarity. The director exhaled slowly, not sure whether to commend her or file a report to the Galactic Defense Council. Before he could decide, the doors slammed open as a towering Jornan officer stormed in, his forearms tense with restrained fury. "This is unacceptable," he barked. "A child laying hands on examiners? Humans must learn restraint." The director raised a hand. "Commander Threx, please," but Lyra spoke before he could finish. "If they didn't want to get caught," she said softly, "they shouldn't have stalked me." The Jornan spun toward her, eyes burning. "You attacked my officers." "No," Lyra corrected gently. "I ended the threat." The room went dead still. The phrasing wasn't bravado, it was instinct. And that made it infinitely more unsettling. The commander stepped forward, towering over her. "You think you're a predator?" Lyra looked up, her brown eyes calm. "You taught me to act like one." Silence. Not a heavy silence, an alert one, the kind predators share when assessing each other. The director stepped between them quickly. "Enough," he said. "Commander, the girl passed the exam. Not as intended, but undeniably passed." The Jornan growled. "Passed? She dismantled our elite instructors." The director didn't flinch. "Which suggests our instructors are not prepared for humans." That chilled everyone. Because it was true. Lyra shifted slightly, suddenly looking unsure. "Am I in trouble?" she asked quietly, the human teenager peeking through the hunter's exterior. The director turned to her, expression softening with something between awe and disbelief. "No, cadet. You are a new category entirely." Murmurs rippled through the officers gathered at the observation window. They had spent generations studying human endurance, human stubbornness, human courage. But instinct, this instinct, they had never truly grasped. They had always assumed humans compensated for their physical inferiority with tools, tactics, and raw determination. They never expected a girl barely 16 to track invisible examiners with senses no alien species had evolved, then subdue them with the precision of a native predator defending territory. The director clasped his hands behind his back. "Lyra Vance," he said, "what you displayed today is not stealth. It is dominance. And dominance is not something we teach here." Lyra looked down at her boots. "I wasn't trying to dominate anyone. I just felt where they were. They moved wrong. Their breaths weren't real. Their cloaks hummed. You told us to be aware." One of the other instructors, still clutching her bruised ribs, groaned from the medic's arms. "She can hear cloaking fields," she muttered weakly. "She tracked the power pulses," another added. "And she felt my heartbeat, through full-phase armor." Threx's eyes widened. Impossible. But the director had already reached the same conclusion. Lyra wasn't beating the exam through cleverness. She was exposing a weakness none of the Academy's elite had ever considered. Humans didn't need to out-tech stealth cloaks if they could sense the living creature behind them. The director exhaled. "Prepare the higher council," he said firmly. We need a new testing protocol. One designed for humans. The Jordan scoffed. Why? She is one girl. The director shook his head. She is the first. More will come. Lyra finally spoke again, her voice small but steady. So, did I fail? The director turned toward her with a thin, reverent smile. Child, he said, you didn't just pass. You changed the test permanently. Lyra blinked. Is that good? It is unprecedented. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. The academy had protocols for exceptional students, dangerous students, gifted students. But what did they do with a human who turned stealth into a hunt? The director bowed his head slightly. Cadet Lyra Vance, welcome to the ranks. And may the galaxy be prepared for what your kind will become. And as Lyra stepped out of the chamber, the lights flickering softly behind her, the question hung in the air, cold and electric. If one human girl could do this, what would a fully trained human battalion be capable of?